Excellent, everybody. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming. Welcome to my workshop, my first ever workshop, and it's simply called Building a Method Book from Scratch. So, oh my God, there's an applause, emoji applauses. So, for those that don't know me, viewers from all over the world, my name is Ludwig. I'm a pianist and composer, but I'm learning to play the piano all over again, right? I'm a complete novice. But the irony is, the company I'm working for called Oclef has given me lots of wonderful, amazing pianists and teachers, and we've come together as a collaboration to build a method book. Ain't that something? So really, I am going right back to the beginning and trying to figure out things that work, things that don't work, going through my memory blocks, and also working with a lot of these other pianists to pick their brains. And so this workshop here, it's going to be an open forum for discussion. It's a lot about sharing ideas and trying to get down to what things should we be keeping in mind when creating a workshop. Sorry, not a workshop, a method book. So my first question to you is, and this is open, right? Is why do we need a method book? If so, so any of you are free to answer this right now. Do you think a method book is valid, and why do we need one? You know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick on Mr. Justin first.
I think to give some structure to how we're learning all the essential skills we need.
I like that. All right, we'll stick with that. What about you then, Mr. Reese?
It gives us kind of like a general language that all of the teachers who are on board with that method use, and that way there's a consistency throughout different levels as students grow and learn. I think that's probably why it's most important to have one.
Yeah, that consistency, right? And actually something, a common language. I love all of that. What about you there, Dr. Fong? What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. It's a roadmap, right? The
Yes.
book's an educational roadmap, and and we definitely need one um, specifically for Oclef because Oclef has a different business structure
Right.
than other piano schools and teachers. So we definitely want something that is specific for Oclef.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And so we're constantly looking to cater, right? We're constantly looking to cater. I actually managed to break it down personally into three different options. So first, I absolutely agree. It's a roadmap, right? So it's looking to take you from where you currently are to where you want to be. Secondly, the method book, it saves us time, right? Instead of having to source different techniques, learning different concepts from all over the place, method book is kind of like your all-in-one place to shop. And that's the third point. It's comprehensive, right? So it's a comprehensive way to approach a new skill. That's quite efficient. And we all know that there are dozens, if not hundreds, right, of method books that have been created throughout the years. And each of them has this common goal to teach you how to learn the piano. But the reason I want to discuss this topic is there are so many different moving parts. Having worked with the pianists here at Oakleaf, there are so many different moving parts to creating a method book. Lots of things pop up, lots of editing has to be done, but that's the fun of getting down to the crux of creating a method book. So hopefully in today's workshop, you'll get some food for thought, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. If you were sitting to create your own method book from scratch, some things that you'd consider, all right? So one of the most important things is just trying to figure out the subject matter. You know, where do you begin? So I want to ask you guys a question. If you're looking to create a method book, what's the one question you'd ask yourself before sitting down to start it? And we'll start with Mr. Reese.
Oh, this is a hard one.
All right.
Well, I guess for me, something that I've done with helping in this process is like thinking about who it's intended for, which really helped to clarify like the way that you go about it. Like, is it intended for the student themselves,
Hmm.
or like for them to sit down and read it, or is it intended for the teacher who's teaching the student, or is it intended for like a parent that's going to sit down with their kid who has no knowledge of like who is the intended audience would probably be my first question I'd ask myself.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. Because without that, then you're just kind of swimming without any kind of beacon. You get lost. I agree. What about you there, Dr. Justin?
I would pretty much agree. Yeah. Who is it for?
It's I
And
think one of
that's pretty much it.
yeah. And Dr. Fong, you've been around young students, young pianists for a while. You're looking to create a book from scratch. What are you looking for before you start the project?
Oh, from my perspective, it's you know, it's not built for pianists, right? It's built for Oclef teachers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not built for teachers who are outside of Oclef because they just have a different business structure.
Yeah.
We teach differently here, so we should design it for our internal use.
Yeah.
If it works, then we can release it to the public, but it has to work for us, right? It has to work for all of the teachers at Oclef.
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So once again, it comes down to the audience. Who's going to be using it? Who is it for? And so one of the questions that I've asked myself as well is, if we're writing this for someone, what is the pianist looking for? What are they wanting to get out of it? And so when everybody's learning from scratch, one of the main things that they want to do is to be able to play something, right? And everybody wants to be able to share that piece of music, especially parents. Parents want their children to be able to share this with their grandparents or their neighbor's dog. And that's the goal. And you want to get there quickly, right? So that's kind of the main aim of these method books, to get you off your feet and running. And so you also want to create a method book that progresses at a pace that isn't too overwhelming, because there's nothing like starting a new subject and then just feeling bogged down by the complexity of it all. And it makes it very easy to give up. And so it's a fine dance as well when you're creating something so that it's accessible, it's comprehensible, and it's also easy to use, right? So it's a functional book. One of the reasons that the students struggle learning how to play, one of the main things is actually translating what they see on the page and putting it to the keyboard. So some thoughts that I had in mind when discussing with everybody when writing this book, and here are some ideas. Number one, you want to create a book that has very straightforward language. That's the first thing. Number two, you want to give simple instruction, right? When you're focusing on it, and you're not focusing on addressing terminology straight away. You keep things just very simple. Otherwise, they get scared and they don't feel encouraged. And number three, notice when things are happening in the music, how your hands are moving, always challenging them to hear the sounds that are coming. And number four, get them to compose as early as possible. This is one of the main things that's really going to, I guess, cement these concepts. Rather than just talking about it, the act of doing is super powerful, right? So then number three, we had to think about notation. One of the things that we want to teach straight away is that the notes, they move by step, right? They can move by skip. Some of them stay very still. And so to prepare our students for the more advanced pieces, we wanted to write notation in a way that was easy to follow from the get-go. So as a guide, what I'd like to do is I'm just going to open up book one, right? And just go through a couple of chapters just to show you what we've been going through to get to this point. All right, so have a little look at this here. All right, so like all method books, we basically begin with three very simple concepts. So we introduce the keyboard, we introduce pitch direction, and also the finger numbers. So we like to keep things just very simple. Everything is very visual. They get an idea of the notes that are going up, the direction, the notes that are going down, and they're indicated with middle C. So we just wanted to start with middle C basically because it's right bang smack in the middle of the piano, and it's very easy to find. And then from here, we also just talk about pitch direction. Super important that they get an idea as you go higher on the keyboard, the notes do get higher in pitch. As they go lower, it's going to go lower in pitch. And this is such a great activity just to experiment with the students right from the get-go. Instead of actually telling them what's going to happen, ask them to tell you what's going to happen if you go higher, what's going to happen if you go lower. And then you can slowly start introducing languages like this here. So we've decided to use the word stepping. So if you're moving from note to note that are right next to one another, we're going to use the word stepping. And then of course we have our finger numbers, and this is going to, and these are the three main things that we have at the beginning. Now, check this out. With all that being said, here's our first opening. On this line, you'll see circles as notes. It's just a very simple language. And then straight off the bat, the student knows where C is, and they're already playing. And we just keep things very simple using finger 2 on the C. Now we want to introduce a second note. We don't even talk about what that note is. We simply tell them that we're just going to be stepping up and stepping down. And what could be a really interesting exercise is you could ignore the instruction, have them just look at this exercise here and see whether they can play it straight off, just by looking. Now, the idea of this here is to train the students to start working, learning more intervallic reading, right? So they're not actually having to guess, but they're just moving by the shape and the direction of the notes. So something that you could also do when you're working with them is have them just trace, right? You just have them, let me do a little bit of tracing right here. There we go. Is trace the direction. We're going up, going down, we're going up, going down, going up. So it can be very visual, and they're going to have this in their mind as they play. Everything in this chapter, we're just moving by step, all right? Let's keep on moving down. Now, I talked to you about asking them the questions so that they realize what is happening, challenge what's happening with the music. Notice how your right hand rocks from side to side, and then get straight into what the sound is that's been created. This movement makes the sound nice and smooth. So already we're talking about tone very early on, and they're going to associate rocking from side to side as creating a smooth sound, all right? Then we slowly start experimenting with moving away from C, and the same thing. They realize that this is middle C, so challenge them to see if they can find this note, which is situated directly above. All right, we'll keep on moving down. And then we talk about one more little thing about technique here. It's always keeping your fingertips in contact with the keys. It just makes the sound easier to control. But have them definitely try it. Have them play without the fingertips touching the keys, and then have them play with the fingertips touching the keys. All right. Now this is my favorite part. It's jam time. After they've learned all the concepts, whatever concept that you're teaching in your own method book, create some kind of activity in which they get to draw or compose. So in this here, I've simply said draw below 6, 7, or 8 circles. All right, these are the notes. And the notes can repeat, and they can step up or down to create your own music. And this is really neat because after they've drawn it, they can perform it. And they already have, within that first lesson, their own piece of music. Your next step could be for them just to do it off the top of the dome. They don't necessarily need to write it down. So they're already starting to play around with improv. All right. So now if we move to 2, this is it. We're simply just going to add a third note. So they're going to look down here and just ask them to observe what they're seeing. They'll notice there's a second line. All right. So another thing when you're creating a method book, we talked about progressing gradually. This is what we're talking about. So they're not being thrown a grand staff right off the bat. We're just going to add a second line, or like a rung on a ladder. And then you start working with them. All right, now you've got 3 different fingers. Off you go and play. Same thing, always encourage them to trace the direction of the notes, just so that they have some way to navigate. All right. And then the same thing here. What is the best fingering to begin for these next 2 exercises? Constantly questioning, because they've already had a little taste of the fingering, and now they're off on their own. And then we have them creating a jam time now with 2 lines. Now the last chapter that I want to show you is introducing this here. We're going back and forth trying to figure out how to introduce long notes and short notes until I realized we'll just call them long notes and short notes. Now one of the things, as we all experience, is that students find it difficult at times to keep a pulse or maintain a rhythm. And so I decided, all right, we just need a 1-syllable word for them to call out as they play. And what better word to use than beat? So as they're playing, the teacher's going to have to sit with the student, or maybe they can have a metronome there, and then practice playing and saying the word beat as they play. Now, it might be slow, it might be fast, it might change speeds. That's okay. It might be beat, 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 beat. That's okay. As long as they're starting to do 2 things at the same time, you can work together to start syncing up the note and the word. All right.
Can I interject?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, that in my opinion we want to create something that is specific for Oclef,
Yeah.
right? And unlike other schools, Oclef does things every day,
Mm.
right? You know, in short intervals, but every day.
Mm.
And I think we have enough data now
Yeah.
to give a pretty good guess on how long does it take for a student's eyes to develop,
Mm.
right? And here's one of the things that I want to be part of the consideration in Oclef is in this method book is that we're not only considering the mental concepts that the student need to understand, right?
Mm.
But how long does it take for them to physically develop their eyes so that they can read these intervals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if we determine that it takes about 3 weeks
Mhm.
for a beginner student to develop their eyes so that they can focus on small vertical intervals,
Mm.
vertical and diagonal intervals,
Yeah.
right? We should create 3 weeks worth of exercises,
Mhm.
right? We shouldn't do chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3.
Mhm.
We should say these are 3 weeks worth of exercises that is on the exact same subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we're going to, the purpose of this, of why everything looks the same, is that we're developing their eyes. And
Yes.
we're developing their fingers or
Yes.
their eye-finger coordination
Yeah.
between finger 1 and 2, finger 1, 2, and 3,
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is markedly different from the method books that are out there that are just based on concepts. Okay, this chapter is a concept, but they don't take in consideration actually how long it takes for a student to
Right.
master that concept. And
Yes.
I want us to keep that in mind when we're developing this.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yep. No, absolutely. So the way that the method book has been developed is you're given a taster of each of the concepts. And then if there are particular areas, even it could be just going between these two notes, we can create dozens of exercises just off one chapter. And so the method book itself really, yeah, it's as you can see, because there are only about 4 or 5 exercises, but it just kind of gives the idea of the concept, right, in one book. And then from there, we'll continue collecting data. And if we find there are certain chapters that we really want to hone in, we can actually create sub books along with the chapters as well. But yeah, I agree. But yeah, this is that's the thing with the.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I go off what Fong said? I love the way that it's arranged right now too. It's very simple, and this is something that you could use definitely during a lesson. Like this is easy to display during a lesson. This is easy to use to teach, and like similar to like the Alfred book series, if it was like if we needed a bunch of the exercises, you would just have a separate book that has a bunch of those exercises. Yeah, and then it would just be because even if most students take 3 weeks, there will be some students who take like forever to do these, or who need a lot less time. So like having a separate book where all of that is and might be beneficial, and it could be like packaged with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyways.
No, I absolutely agree. This is why this is the workshop is vital, because it's also kind of like an opening to our workbook and to all those that are viewing it. So all those that are viewing it, if you have comments, please do comment down below on the YouTube clip, because this is yet another way to approach teaching piano from scratch. But yeah, you can think of all these chapters as lessons, and then we can advance from there. Because once you get to chapter 3, we're slowly starting to introduce, it's playing the same pattern, but just using the right hand and the left hand. But this gives you guys an idea of really what we're trying to create, at least for Oclef. This book is recommended that you use it with a teacher. So if you're an older student, yeah, you may choose to work on this on your own, but it really is suggested that you work with a parent or a teacher and they'll guide you through it. Because as you know, with a lot of kids, they're not going to read all these instructions. But this is a guide for the teachers out there to teach these different concepts. But this is the opening. This is just the trailer. So you're going to have to check out the whole book to see how it unfolds. But these are your first 3 chapters, or at least the first 3 chapters that we Oclef deem to be an important introduction to learning piano. Right? So then the last thing that I want to address is when you're creating a book for yourself, setting that criteria. And so what we've decided is that you want to think about what you'd like for them to learn. And then you can create an exercise for them to learn that particular skill, right? Then test it out, which is what we're going to be doing with this book here. And then you adjust accordingly. So for instance, let's say that off the bat, you're Mrs. Harrison from down the road and you want to teach Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to a student. They only know middle C. This kid has no idea that a G is about to approach. They're probably going to play this. Or it's going to be a whole guessing game. So right there is your exercise. And so let me just quickly find this for you guys here. 1 second. Where did it go? Ah, there it is. Right there is your exercise. So you got to be quick to try and figure out, okay, clearly this kid doesn't know intervals. And so you can use that as an opportunity instead of teaching Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to start creating a piece of music using just very small intervals. So let's go ahead from this here. And your piece, all right, let's say it's middle C, might just be going between C and D. And you're going to teach them that this is a second. Then you might have a little piece that's going from C to E. And ask them to observe, all right? Just consider that there's going to be a little line right in here. Ask them to observe the spacing between the notes. Oh my goodness, I see that if it's going from line to space, it's a second. That's interesting. If it's going from line to line, that's going to be a third. And so you slowly build from there, these small exercises until they can recognize that we have a fifth goes from here to here. And then you ask Tim, how do you know this is a fifth? He's going to tell you straight away. Oh, I can see it's 2 notes that are on lines, and then there's 1 line right bang in the middle. So for now, you would base all your interval practice on middle C, right? Just so that they get an idea of this spacing. Then once they can do that there, have them write it out. As I said earlier, there's nothing more powerful than actually writing out seconds and thirds and fourths or intervals, right? You can also work, as been discussed earlier with the colleagues, creating exercises where they can tell the difference between a third and a fourth, or a fourth and a fifth. But if you can get them also writing it out, it's super powerful. And that's one great idea that you can use when developing your own method book. So that's just a taste for now of the workshop. But I definitely encourage you guys to create, and all those that are viewing, if you've got any particular skills that you want to teach, just send that piece of music off to a student and observe how they work with it. Write down the issues that they're currently struggling with, and then write them down, and then see if you can create a very basic exercise to be able to tackle that. And then the biggest thing about this is that once they go through these exercises and they can finally play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, you're going to be able to retain that student. Not only that, they're going to be able to stick to the piano, and they're going to want to continue playing and find that enjoyment, because everything about playing the piano will become just a lot more easy to understand. So that's it for now. That's an introduction to building a workbook from scratch. I hope you all enjoyed your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ludwig.
Yeah, no worry at all. I'm excited. Let me just go ahead and pause this. Thank you, YouTube viewers from around the world. I love you, New Zealand.